Hello everyone and good afternoon. My name is Anna Spooner and I'm in the Tastings and Events team at the Wine Society. We do always love a lunchtime event, so thank you all for joining us. We're absolutely thrilled to have Chris Alheit, and I can't think of a better way to spend a Monday lunch than with a glass of the Society's new exhibition Chenin. So before I let Locke MW, our buyer for South Africa and a big fan of Chris's wines, do a proper introduction, I will just dip into a little bit of housekeeping for anyone in particular that's new to our Zoom events. So basically you have two options to view. You have the gallery view or the speaker view. Gallery view simply allows you to watch multiple speakers, so Joe and Chris at the same time, for example, or you can swap to speaker view just to watch in big the person who's currently talking. To do that, simply swipe if you're on a mobile device, or if you're on a laptop, click on the top right hand side of the screen. There's a little button at the top. We are going to have time for some questions, so if you haven't already sent them via email, then please do use the Q&A button throughout the course of the session. Again, depending on your device, that'll be at the bottom or the top of your screen. If you would like to ask your questions directly to Chris and Joe, then we're hopefully going to be able to unmute you. So if you want to ask yourself, then just say when you're submitting your question. Otherwise, I'm happy to ask on your behalf. Please do also use the chat. Let us know where you are, what you're drinking, even if it's a cup of tea, that's quite all right and very understandable for 1 p.m. on a Monday. I'm lucky enough, I got my order in quickly for the new Chenin, but some of you may have some of Chris's wines, his other wines as well that we've sold for much longer. So without further ado, I would love, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce Joe Locke MW, our South African buyer. Cheers, Joe. Happy Monday lunchtime. Oh, I think Joe might still be on mute. There we go.
Got it. Thank you very much, Emma, and welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. It's a great pleasure to be here to be able to introduce Chris Alheit. I am guessing that most of you who have joined us will already know Chris's name. You may well have met him. You may well have tried his wines already. Hi, Chris. I think I first met you and Suzanne in 2013. I believe that was my first visit to you guys, but you'd already been over the previous year to our tastings.
Yes, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and that was after I tasted Cartology, the very first Cartology, 2011, for the very first time in May of that year. So I was lucky I got to taste it quite early. And I was looking back at my notes at the time. I wrote, it was, even though it was nothing to do with the Chardonnay, to me it was reminiscent of a young white Burgundy, a young white, top-notch white Burgundy is actually what I wrote. And I think it was something to do with the combination of the texture and the minerality and the richness of the wine, albeit dry and fresh. And that's what it made me think of. So it was fascinating. The very next year, the Platter's Guide gave you your 5 stars, and things kind of took off, didn't they? I mean, it was, I've heard you say before that was a pretty life-changing moment, and I'll let you talk about that in a minute. But you'd already made a huge decision with Suzanne when you first started out in 2010. You trained, I don't know whether you trained together, but you both trained did wine studies together, although you switched from medicine, I think, which would have been following the family tradition. And that was after you'd done your in Australia, in California. So by my reckoning, for someone who's not yet 40, you've done a hell of a lot of big decision making and a lot of different stuff already in that time. You moved to Hemelrand. You had to say goodbye to the Lazarus vineyard, and then since then you've taken on your own vineyards. So super exciting, short whistle stop career, and I'm really looking forward to you taking us through it with I believe some fabulous shots. So Chris, over to you.
Joe, thank you very much for that. Can you just indicate whether you can hear me clearly, because my I've just lost you for a few moments.
We can hear you, Chris.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Joe. I really appreciate it. And I'm thrilled with the comparison to White Burgundy. That's very nice of you. And yes, you're right. That 2011 Cartology was obviously our first wine that we made for ourselves. And it was a real game changer for, I mean, it took us from completely obscure to sort of well known in the UK overnight and in South Africa also. The wine was massively significant for us. And, you know, it really did what we hoped it would do. And I think that maybe your tasting notes, that's one of the nicest bits of flattery I've received in a long time. But what we're hoping that Cartology would do, and still does, is show people that that our lovely old vineyards, especially our white wine vineyards in South Africa, can make wines that don't need to apologize for themselves, don't need to, you know, don't need to pretend to be something else. We can just make wines that are South African and that have a clear South African identity. That's the whole point of Cartology, and it's frankly that's the idea that sort of undergirds our entire business. The story of Alheit Vineyards, if I, you know, I suppose that's what I need to do is tell you a little bit about where we came from. Anna's got some images, Mike's got some images we're going to share in a minute. There's a nice one of Suzanne and myself standing in the vineyard. Oh, there it is. And I just wanted to say first and foremost that the Alheit Vineyards is Suzanne and I. It's both of us. Yeah, maybe my name is out there more now because I'm fully involved with the business all the time with the vineyards and in the winery. Suzanne was very involved in the first year, and she's now very much full-time raising our kids. We believe that's a very worthwhile investment of her time, and it seems to be paying off very much. We have an 8-year-old daughter, a 6-year-old son, and a 3-year-old son, and that's sort of the most special thing in our lives. We do love the wine, you know, very much, and the old vineyards very much. But what Suzanne's doing now with the kids is great. That's a picture of us sitting in the winery, you know, having a chat and having a cup of tea. And that's my brood. That's the crew. So Suzanne and I, after our studies, we studied around the same time. That's where we met. We had the great privilege of traveling together, and just had some wonderfully influential experiences. We loved California and we loved Australia and learned a great deal in those places. But definitely it was the experiences in Europe that really got us thinking, particularly the way that, you know, regional identity is so critical over there. And sort of the effortlessness of European wine and the way they live with wine and the way they are with wine. It seems sometimes like in the New World, we're trying very hard. You know, we, excuse me, we're maximum effort. And I saw that in California, and it's not a critique. I think it's, you know, I think it's good to try your best, but there's just something about the way the Europeans approached it as a part of their lives. And, you know, Suzanne always said, you know, it should be something that is more obvious, but we didn't really see it in practice until we were in Europe, which is the grape should be suited to the place. Yeah, wonderful travels in Europe. Santorini was massively influential on us to see those white wines made in a warm climate that had so much nervous energy and texture. Anyway, it's a long story, but the point is when Susie and I got back to South Africa, our dear family friends, Hans and Mary and Evanes, offered us an opportunity here on Hemelrand, where I'm sitting, to occupy their winery as tenants and to start pursuing this dream of making very South African wines. They also, we'll talk about it in a minute, but they planted a young vineyard, which we call Hemelrand Vine Garden. You know, a very risky, very risky idea, which has borne some incredible fruit. You know, we're very, very pleased with that wine, but we'll get to that in a minute. This is a photograph of a vineyard, and it's the type of vineyard that really summarizes a lot of our story. With Cartology, because we want to make a South African heritage wine, we focus on the way that things were done many years ago, decades ago, centuries ago. All our vineyards that make Cartology and make our single vineyard chenins are dry farmed bush vines like these guys. This was taken just last week, actually. This is on a farm called Alheit in the mountains close to Clan William. on the west coast. This vineyard goes into Cartology and also makes a wine called Magnetic North, which is one of our best single vineyard chenins. Tim, you can go on to that other photo. It's La Colleen, the next picture. Look at that guy. So this is the thing, when people think about South African wine, look, I haven't been around for that long, and I don't know what the perception was, before our time in the trade and in the industry. What I assume and think is that the outside, or let's say the British, for instance, picture of South African wine is, not really accurate. And I suppose a part of what we're trying to do is to reframe what South African wine can be, and in fact is. I mean, look at this vineyard. This is the La Colleen Semion vineyard. I think this was 2014, back in 2014 in the winter. I took this picture, which is why it's not as good as the other photos which Tasha Second took, the other pictures. But this vineyard is planted in 1936, and it's that fantastic old type of field blend of Semion that we have in the Cape. I mean, this DNA has been with us since the 1650s, and I'm rambling, but if you think about it, a plant that arrives 350 years ago and is, that goes through generations and generations of farmers who are reselecting their best plants over time, over centuries, there must be a genetic drift away from the original type. And I think that's what we see in these old Semion vines, where we have Semillon Blanc and Gris and Rose and Bath and all kinds of iterations and colors all mixed up, jumbled up in these old vineyards. That's a bit of a long speech. I hope you guys can still hear me.
We can, Chris. And just a quick comment on that. It was, I know that you've done quite a lot of work over time with Rosa Kruger. And I know she's helped you to find some vineyards, and she's been hugely influential. And she was doing, as you did not so long ago, she was doing an Instagram live chat with Tim Atkin. And she was talking about those old vines, and chenins in particular. And she said, if you can live in that heat, that drought, you deserve respect. That was a wonderful kind of expression of the kind of background, and you think about the extreme conditions that you guys have, and you've had particularly bad in the last few years, but by looking after these ones, you create something as beautiful as that photo we're looking at here.
Yeah, this again was taken last week. This is a different angle on Arbeidsend, which is the Magnetic North Vineyard again. It's just such a phenomenal place, Joe, and you can see the sand. It's red sand over red clay. This particular piece of the sand is a bit paler. Other parts of the vineyard, it's very red. And a picture really does say 1,000 words. The best wines that we've had from this vineyard, and from, in fact, most of our dry farm vineyards have come in the drought years. From 2016 onwards, I personally saw, obviously the winemaking probably had something to do with that. We were learning the vineyards and, getting to know them, understanding what they do, how they respond to the season, how they ripen, learning to read the canopy and the crop load, etc. But what I was trying to say was we're getting our very, very best wines from these vineyards in the years of struggle, when there was just enough soil water to make a wine. We'd get not much wine, but we'd get something really, really, really special. It comes back to trying to show people what the Cape has, and it's also about trying to retrain South African wine lovers and South African winemakers to have a look at what's right under our noses. There was a time not that long ago where we were cringing at all the old Chenin and Colombo and Palomino and Cinzo and all that stuff that we have here in the Cape, and now they're being regarded as special, as treasures that need to be sought and found and expressed. I think we were relatively early in that game, in that narrative, and it's something we're very passionate about. Obviously, we were looking at people like Carissa, who was phenomenally influential on a whole generation of winemakers, and also guys like Adi and Eben, and they're real heroes of the sort of, not that I would call them previous generation, those guys are all about 10 years older than my crowd. But they just had a massive impact and really broke open new ground for the Cape to look at itself in a new way. And Suzanne and I took that message very seriously, and we've tried to live that and walk that, for the last 10 years. And that's another reason why we believe so strongly in minimalist winemaking. We never acidify wine. We never put sulfur in juice. We never inoculate anything. It's always just natural wine, but we don't like using the term natural wine because it's been so badly abused in the last 15 years. But that is effectively what we do. And it's a small niche that we occupy, and we try to occupy it very well.
Chris, what you were saying made me think of something that I've heard you talk about, which is the sustainability of those old vineyards, and that you've been very proactive in trying to encourage a move towards paying per hectare as opposed to paying for yield, because I'm sure you'll go on to explain it, but part of your grapes come from your own vineyards, part is leased vineyards, and part is in partnership with growers. And that sort of partnerships with growers is hugely important for all of you guys doing the most exciting stuff in South Africa. But you've said that those farmers are absolutely critical. The terroir can't do it on its own. You have to be a good farmer, as you can see from those lovely vines. And it's important to keep those guys in business, isn't it? Or you won't have good fruit.
Oh, that's right, Joe. It's a really important point. And it's the point that I'm not sure is really that well articulated and or realized, by the wine drinking public at large, that might see our wines or other South African wines like our wines as relatively expensive compared to some of the other stuff coming out of the Cape. But on a global stage, if you really look at the yields and the vineyards and the places and the soils and the effort levels that go into making the wines, then I think that they represent quite a bargain. We're very pro idea, especially with very marginal vineyards, and a lot of our vineyards are absolutely marginal, yielding between 1 and 2 tons a hectare, of paying per hectare to take the risk away from the farmer. And I recently got my fingers burned a little bit by being candid about the type of money we're talking about per ton. So I probably won't go down that road again. It'll be too specific, but if you'll forgive me for that. If we want the resources to survive, we're going to have to remunerate the farmers properly and remove a lot of the risk from them, because you've got this generation of younger winemakers who want the glory for these terrific wines that these old vines make. They need to be, if they want the upside, they need to be willing to shoulder a lot of the downside. And I think that means paying per hectare. And then if you get a big smack like we did this year in 2020 with this particular vineyard, you can see how drought affected this vineyard in the shot is. This is the Hemelrand vineyard on Odam, and not for lack of trying. The farmers can't make it rain, unfortunately. So this is spring 2 weeks ago or a week ago, and there are some vines budding, and we're glad to see that. But vineyards like this, that are yielding 1 to 2 tons a hectare, it absolutely has to be a per hectare deal. All those wines cannot exist, and no reasonable person could expect the farmer to, break even or lose money every year on an old vineyard, so that a young winemaker can have his name in the newspaper. That's not a proposition that's sustainable at all. So very, very important that young winemakers who are approaching these old vineyards now understand that it's perhaps the barrier to entry used to be low, but it can't be that way anymore if the narrative is to continue, to continue making heritage wine out of serious old vineyards. We need to understand that some of them are going to give us very, very low yield. Some of them don't. Like Colleen, for instance, is always a per ton agreement with that farmer, because I've never known that vineyard to yield less than 5 tons a hectare. It's amazing. At 80 something years old, it still yields about 5 tons a hectare a year. Yeah.
That's astonishing for such an old vineyard.
That's one of the reasons Semion was so well loved in the previous century. In the 1800s, it was the most planted wine grape in South Africa, because it yielded terrifically well into its old age, and it also was pretty easy to make good wine out of, because the skins are thick. So when you press it, you get very little potassium in the juice, and you get a pretty stable pH, and not that difficult to make sound wine out of Semion. So I think that's one of the reasons it was so widely planted. Okay, that's a nice picture of our place. Unfortunately, I'm in the screen, so that kind of wrecks the photo a little bit. But there I am with my lockdown body rocking it. Look like a baby seal at the moment. But anyway, let's not go there. We're calling the place Brimridge. The farm is called Niverdam, but we've always called it Niverdam sort of affectionately because we had a great relationship with Krista, the previous owner of the place. That's the name of the farm. But I was looking for something that is a little more, that sort of takes you somewhere, you know, brings you to a place. And on one of our neighbors, Ibn Sadi, you might not have heard of him. He also makes a little bit of wine. He found a name on an old map, which was Besemgoed Kop, which is a bit of a mouthful. And perhaps I made a mistake anglicizing that and going for Brimridge. Maybe I should have kept it as Besemgoed Kop, but anyway, the decision is made. So this is our place in the Swartland. This is granite soil. This particular patch is the youngest patch on the farm. This was planted in 1985. It's a really beautiful elevated granite ridge. You can see Kasteelberg in the background there. And this is a game changer for us. And one of the reasons why we can make a wine like the exhibition wine for Wine Society is because we now have full control over, you know, this is 20 hectares of old chenin bush vines. So yeah, it's a very special sort of milestone for us, I suppose you could say.
And Chris, it was only last year that you secured that vineyard. Was it a vineyard that you'd already been working?
Yeah, it was. We started farming it in the March. We took ownership in October, but we've been farming it since March, and we've been working with Krista, the previous owner, since 2011. So that farm has always contributed to Cartology, and then later on was responsible for the wine that we called Fire by Night. And we've now, just to confuse everybody thoroughly, we've changed that wine's name to Brimridge, which is, it's basically a selection of our very best sites on that farm. And the balance of the wine usually ends up in Cartology because it's always just great. You know, it's a very particular kind of chenin. It's that classic Paardeberg. I don't know if you have thatched roofs in England, but we have them here. And if you walk into a new thatched roofed house, it's got that lovely sort of fresh. It's not grassy. It's almost touching on quince, but it's not quite quince. It's a thatch. You know, we call it thatch. Got a thatch roof sort of smell and lime juice. Those type of flavors are normally pretty evident in the Paardeberg wines, and they're energetic. You know, they've got a lot of nervous energy. If you don't pick them too late, if you pick them too late, then it's all over. Unless you acidify your wine, and then, you know, why are you talking about terroir in the first place? So, that was probably a bit of a bold statement. Sorry. This is a very dashing picture of me pruning a vine. we went taking photos with you know, John Seckham's wife Tash is a great photographer, and we're busy redoing our website, Joe. So we went out and I had to do some action shots. So this is, I really am pruning this vine. It does actually happen.
It's great, but it does underline the fact that these bush vines are really low to the ground. I mean, it must be pretty hard work, pretty backbreaking work. Yeah,
it's pretty tough going. It's positives and negatives. You know, from a labor point of view, the pruning and suckering can be a little bit tough, and the harvesting. But there's a lot less grapes to pick, and there's a lot less tucking in work. So yeah, it sort of all balances itself out. You can see just where my knee is, and in line with the vines, there's a line of mulch. That's something we did this year, which you know, we've talked to the guys that understand dry farming, and obviously we're still learning every year. And I've seen how Evan is managing his new vineyards, and we've got a guy called Etienne de Blanche, who's a hell of a bright guy, and he's helping us a lot with our vineyards. And mulch was the direction we decided to take this year, especially in light of how low the rainfall has been, and we didn't know how much rain we'd get this winter. As it turns out, we actually had a reasonable winter, not too bad, in fact, and a lot of the dams are at 100% capacity, thank the Lord. It's wonderful. So yeah, this is Brimridge, and that's me pruning some old chenin. Thrilling stuff. You can see the focus on my face there.
Sorry to interrupt again, but just when do you think we'll see the first Broomridge wines?
So we've bottled a 2019 one as Broomridge. So that should be getting to the UK later this year. Yeah, I've got a picture of the label over here. This was it's a little bit scuffed, unfortunately, but so this was sort of Suzanne's baby, and we wanted something quite stark and a little bit, what's the right word for it? I don't know. Simple and simple is probably the wrong word. Just sort of clean and beautiful and a little bit haunting, I suppose. You know, rather than a lot of our labels are quite colourful. This we wanted just black and white.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. Have I still got you guys? Can you still hear me? There we go. Okay. This is our cellar team. These guys have been with us for quite a while, and I wanted some pictures just to take the viewers just to the winery. You know, one of the things that that I like to communicate, I think, is very important, is for people to understand that you know, and it's not a call for sympathy or for people to say, oh, we need to like this wine because it's made by people, but it's important to understand that the wines that you're presented with when you drink them, unless they're from a large corporate, you know, which obviously our wines are not, are made by people, you know, and they represent the life's work of people. You know, the wines that we release to the public every year really are our life's work. Suzanne and I, that's what we do. You know, we don't do anything else, and that requires a team to help us. And this is our team. These guys are legends. It's Ernest and Mondi and Nati and Farnwell and Gabriel, and obviously me. So when harvest time comes around and there's a great deal of grapes to be shifted and lifted and thrown and digging out presses and driving trucks in the middle, and you know, it's these guys that make it happen. I do most of the driving in the middle of the night, but yeah. So that's the cellar team, and then I've got one or two more winery photos there, Tim, I think. Let's have a look. Oh, was that the only winery photo? Okay, that's fine. Joe, then I don't know if it's too early in the game for us to start talking about the exhibition wine. No,
let's do that.
I wanted to show you guys this photograph. A few years ago, we started working with a farm called Waterkloof. It's not the famous Waterkloof in Somerset West, which is one of the Buttino properties. It's not that one. But the name of the farm is Waterkloof. It's right up in the upper Blaarklippen in the valley there, and it's you're looking at it in the early winter. This is another block on the same farm. If you go back to that previous photo there, Tim, or Anna, who's running the photos at the moment, then you can kind of see where it's positioned. It's right up in the kloof. That's the old farmhouse. The property is full of these beautiful trees and 6 hectares of stunning, like really stunning old chenin planted in the early 80s. And it's a property that we're extremely excited about, and we've got control over all the vines on the property. So something that we're doing now with Cartology and with all of our wines, and I've told you this before, Joe, is that we're busy. So it's not news to you, but we went through the whole process and find like excellent new old vineyards, if that makes any sense, and develop a portfolio of vineyards. We went through that whole thing through 14, 15, 16, and then got to a point where I felt that I just wanted more agricultural control, which is one of the decisions or one of the reasons for the decision to buy land, and also the principle, you know, that's driven us to, I suppose the right corporate word is to rationalize our portfolio of vineyards or farms that we work with, and instead of having 24 farms with a little bit of chenin on each farm, rather have 10 vineyards, you know, and then have more tons per site, per property. And that means we need to find places like Niverdam, like Broomridge, our place, and like this, Waterkloof. So this is not just basically for us, and it's really something. It's deep red, gravelly soils. We're getting to know the vineyard. and getting to understand it. And we have a big contribution or a big input in the farming now. This is a picture of Susie and I there in Block A. This goes right up into the mountain in the upper Block Cliff and part of Stellenbosch. So we have a great deal of excitement for Waterkloof. And now in the early few years of working with it, 2020 was the second year, so 2019 was the first year. We're still sort of learning the place, understanding when to pick, how to treat it. This is late afternoon. This was a barley cover crop, and obviously just before the vines are pruned. Looking back towards Stellenbosch, if the background was in focus, you'd be looking back down towards Table Mountain as well. It's sort of up in the mountain. And yeah, so in that process of learning about it, you know, and perhaps lacking absolute confidence in how I'm approaching the block now, I've used this along with the wonderful Waterkloof, along with another very excellent site called Karibib, which is on the False Bay coast of Stellenbosch. We don't have any photographs of Karibib, I'm afraid, which is sort of a raised bush vine on granite soil. So, and those are the two main old vineyards that make the exhibition chenin for Wine Society. Yeah, so I don't want to sound like a marketer, but I think you guys have got a very good wine for a good price there, so you should buy it.
and I must admit, well, actually, our email, the wine's only just been released. The email's just gone out, and I was in time to put into the email copy that hopefully we might be able to continue with some 2020, but the back label had already been done when at that point we thought it was just going to be a one-off. It was just going to be this vintage, but we're kind of hopeful that you know, depending on what suits you, we may be able to follow it, which for us is great, because some of our exhibition wines we follow year on year. Sometimes it's a one-off, sometimes it's a bit of both. So yeah, that's absolutely great. You know, we're there and happy to look, especially, you know, something that looks good. It's good, you know, it's exciting.
Thanks, Joe. No, I really appreciate that, and I must say, it's you guys have been going since the 1870s or something like that, and it's you know, and you know, knowing that you've passed your NW exams and you're taking this whole thing seriously and getting behind South African wine, I must say it's a massive you know, honor for us to be working so closely with the Wine Society. It's great. It really is something that makes me happy. And
well, I think we're the lucky ones. We started with you with the Cartology 11, and we've since where we could. A lot of the, of course, a lot of the single vineyard wines are produced in such tiny volumes that we have rarely had access to those. It's depended a bit on the year, but you've got a good network of the sort of the really good independent wine trade throughout the UK and elsewhere. So if people are keen to find those wines, then you know, good local wine merchants will almost certainly have them or have access to them. So they're well worth seeking out.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. Yeah, Richard's done a great job getting our wines out there. And as you say, the smallest single vineyard production really is the wines are made in, you know, between 1,000 and 3,000 bottles, so quite small. But you know, Wine Society has always been a great home for Cartology, and we are very, very happy about that. And there's another wine that we make out of the young vineyard here on Hemelrand that I'd like to take a minute just to give a little bit of a push, if I may. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please, yeah. Please do.
Okay, cool. This is Hemelrand Vine Garden. So that's a wine with a very cool backstory. Hans and Marianne Evenes, the people who own Hemelrand, and have, you know, given us the opportunity to rent the winery and to make wine here. They themselves also really wanted to produce grapes and make wine, not just to have a winery to lease out. So we chatted a lot with them in the beginning about what to plant, and we wanted to do something different. You know, yeah, we didn't really want to kind of fit in with the Hemel-en-Aarde paradigm. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just felt that the climate here was capable of more than, you know, Chardonnay and Pinot. It does those two things extremely well, but there's definitely potential in other grapes here. So we decided on a white field blend, one wine, one property, one wine type of idea. So we've planted Roussanne, Chardonnay, Chenin Blanc, Verdelho, and a little bit of Muscat, and I think 100 vines of Vineyard as well. But I mean, it doesn't even show up on the label. There's so little of it. And the idea is that, you know, that the wine is going to vary naturally vintage on vintage. It's, you know, some years the Roussanne will produce a bit more, some years a bit less, some years the Chardonnay will be up. You understand the principle. So it's, there's a built-in vintage variation, which I think is fantastic. And now that the vines are a bit more mature, they're around 10 years old now. I must say the last 2 or 3 vintages of that wine have really, really been remarkable. You know, it's a real winemaker's dream. You know, you don't lose any sleep over the pH and the acidity. I know those things are boring for lay people, but you know, they're very important for us. And Hemelrand's one of those places where you can actually ripen your grapes and still have unbelievable natural acidity, you know, with great flavor. So yeah, if you haven't tried Hemelrand Fine Garden yet, it's definitely an original, and I think you should try it. It's, and I think if you're a wine geek, I think you should put it into blind lineups with your wine clubs and with your wine groups, because there's no way anyone's gonna guess what it is.
I find it absolutely fascinating too. You know, it's still such a young vineyard,
yeah,
and already giving you so much. So it has to be so exciting for the future, I think.
I think so. And
was the field blend thing, was that inspired by Europe? Because of course there are a few parts of Europe where field blends, for one reason or another, were quite commonplace. Is that where it came from?
It very much was inspired by those ideas, but I suppose one could say that it was a little bit engineered, where a lot of those European field blends just sort of happen over time, and some of them by accident, some of them not. Though. So we love that idea of one wine from one place with a few different grapes expressing that place. You know, I think in the old European context, like in Portugal and places like that, you know, it was, and in early California as well, it was a case of if one grape didn't do so well, there'd be something else in the field that did well that year. In our case, it was more of an idea of, in my sort of imagination. Let me try to explain this. My mom, when I was little, she used to tell me that the water from all the different towns that she's lived in all had a different color assigned to them in her mind that she had, and I always thought she was, you know, odd. And I have exactly the same experience now with food and particularly with wine. I have a kind of a color map. It's difficult to explain, different backgrounds and different geometric patterns and some non-geometric patterns and some random stuff. And color in my mind when I taste the wines and when I look at the wines, and in my mind, having tasted, you know, some Roussanne from overseas and locally, and understanding Chenin and Chardonnay, I try to build something in my mind that I thought would be interesting. And then also it came down to the practicality of what kind of vineyard material was actually available. So I had this little cathedral of flavor built in my mind, and then it came down to what we could get, and we were very grateful to be able to get pretty much everything that we wanted to plant. And you know, I've also taken a while to get to know the vineyard. I used to pick the Muscat too late, and now I pick it early enough so that it doesn't dominate the wine. And you know, I think that that any honest winemaker will tell you that they don't know everything. You know, they're still learning as they go, and you get one chance a year to learn some more. And hopefully, you know, you're perceptive enough to get better every year. So I think that our Hemelrand wines have gone from being, you know, very flavorful and impressive to being a bit more refined, and I think probably more impressive for it. So I'm really, really pleased with the latest iterations. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both.
We
do have quite a few questions. If it's all right to kick off with a few questions. I've sort of got a question, semi-statement question of my own, Chris. Earlier when we spoke before the call, you mentioned that you felt that this was maybe a baby Alheit wine, the new Chenin. I wondered, obviously it's not from the same sites, but are there any similarities in the winemaking, or how would you compare, say, the exhibition Chenin to the Cartology, which obviously so many of our members would be familiar with?
Here we are. No, they're definitely first cousins. There's no question about it. No, and you know, as you get to know and as Joe alluded to earlier, it's a project that may continue into the future. And you know, we're really trying to push the quality envelope as hard as we can with Alheit Vineyards. And sometimes, you know, that means there are wines that I feel that
I think Chris may have frozen Joe.
to components, and then that.
In the meantime, whilst he reconnects, Joe, I know that you've actually got some in front of you as well.
I do. Exactly.
I have just tried it for the first time. I wonder whether you might be able to give members some thoughts, perhaps those who haven't managed to get hold of a bottle already. What should they expect from the glass?
Okay, so it's been a really interesting journey with this wine, because I first tasted this wine when I was in the Loire, at the Loire Salon early in the year. It just so happened that that was the first opportunity to taste the sample. And of course, in that context, I was tasting it alongside some Loire examples of different styles, but it was really interesting.
Okay.
So tasting it in the Loire, it tasted more like a Southern Hemisphere wine, of course, but it still had that some of that kind of stony minerality as a thread running through it. So you've got a little bit of oak still showing in the wine. You've got some lovely body and texture to the wine. But there's, for me, it's a lovely kind of sappy whetstone character that you get across your palate, which I really love, and it helps. I think some of it is what Chris refers to as the energy in the wine. So yeah, I think it's looking really well. I'm delighted to see that you know, that at the point of launch, it's looking good, and I think the wine will also do well. It's not long arrived, so you know, it's only going to settle down nicely in bottle. It is under screw cap, you know, so clearly that's going to keep it, you know, good and fresh. I've probably been conservative with the drink dates. It was something I was going to ask you about, Chris. You know, at the very beginning, I had no idea what drink dates to put on wines like Cartology or the Vine Garden. A straightforward chenin is perhaps a bit easier, but nevertheless, it's tricky, because until you've tasted those wines when they're much more mature, you don't really know. You know, so I think I'm gradually extending the dates, vintage on vintage, unless it's a particularly hot or tricky vintage. But I'm gradually extending them as I'm just seeing how well these wines hold that wonderful plateau of freshness and character. Have we got
Thanks,
you?
Joe. I'm back. Can you hear me? I hope I'm back. Okay. Sorry about that. Joe, I think a lot of what you're describing is that that sort of energy or tension in the wine. I think it's a soil thing. As I mentioned, Waterkloof is about 60% of the wine, and that you'll definitely feel that the palate has, you know, even though the alcohol is not high, there's definitely some richness there, and a bit of structure. I think that's the red soil thing that we get from Waterkloof, and then there's quite a bit of Karibib, which is that right on the ocean, but quite elevated on the upper mid slope of a hill on granite soil, and then you get that kind of that saline, like tense sort of thread through the wine, and I think that's probably what you're referring to. That you know, one of the really interesting things about, and you've done this with me before, is tasting through the barrels and the different soil types. You know, and to answer your previous question, Anna, the winemaking is exactly the same for this wine. We treat it exactly the same way as we do with the Cartology parcels, and actually all of these parcels are candidates for Cartology.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris.
And given you know, depending on how they perform.
I think we may have lost Chris again, but it could be my internet. So I'm going to ask firstly Can
you hear me, Anna?
Yes, I can hear you again now.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. We have had a couple of questions about other potential future wines. I'm not sure whether we've lost Chris again. If Chris is here, we'll ask the question, Chris, have you ever been interested or do you plan on making a red wine? Oh, I think we've probably lost him again.
Mostly
Joe,
experiment. Can you hear me?
Joe, you're on mute, but what I would say is, Joe, whilst Chris is just dealing with that, we have actually had quite a few people ask about the drink dates, particularly going back, one gentleman's got a Cartology, I think from 2014. Could you maybe describe what was your version of conservative, and then what has changed? How much longer do you think?
Okay, so I don't have the drink dates in front of me, and I'm afraid that if I try and get into the system while we're speaking, it all might go horribly wrong. But I think there are a couple of vintages of Hemelrand available on the website, on our website at the moment. And then we've got a couple of just tiny quantities of that we have left of Cartology 16 and 18, which are soon to go out on an email. So that will then give you those drink dates. Basically, I think I would have based my initial drink dates on top quality Chenin Blanc, which of course is the base of these wines. Certainly it's the base of Cartology. And then I might have tweaked it down a year or two, but then over the last few years, I've gradually extended that. And I've had the opportunity to taste either one or two of the more mature vintages that we've had, or that I've had with Chris or elsewhere. And again, try and tweak accordingly. We try not to change the system dates too much, otherwise we have to write to everybody to warn them. So sometimes if we're writing about the wine later, we would say, well, actually, it'll go beyond that. This was the date we originally gave, but honestly, you're safe to go beyond. And that tends to work better because different people like wines at different stages too. Now, do we have Chris back? Because there was a question about reds, wasn't there?
I think so, yes, Chris. So it was a question, I believe, from Anne and Bart. A few people have actually asked, do you ever plan on making a red wine?
I hope you guys can hear me. I'm so sorry about the technical issues. Right. Yeah, red wine, Anne and Bart. We made that Flotsam and Jetsam Cinsault for a few years out of like fantastic old bush vine Cinsault, and we loved that. We did it all whole cluster, and we tried to really push that.
Oh no, I think poor Chris is gone.
After a while, I was thinking to myself that Dale is going to.
Oh, many apologies. I think Chris may have gone again.
We've definitely got a gremlin, haven't we? But there was,
we have, and maybe a little bit of a lost cause, Joe, and I'd hate for members to not be able to see. What I wonder is, we have got the Q&As here. If members would be able to submit any questions to Chris specifically via email, then we will follow up and get them answered. I think that's probably the easiest way. We've certainly got a few questions, some technical stuff on lees aging and all sorts of things. So what I'd suggest, Chris, I'll email you afterwards, but we'll take those questions down. What we'll do is we'll get them over to Chris and to Suzanne, get them answered, and then we will post them on the community. And if you're not a member of the community, do not fear, you can email us and ask for the answers as well. And I think that's going to be the easiest thing to do, but I'll follow up on an email on that one.
I can hear you again now. I don't know if it's too late to try to answer the question.
I tell you what, if you're happy to finish off on the red wine question, Chris, that so many people asked.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah,
that would be fantastic. And then I think for the rest, we'll probably follow up on email if that's all right.
Yeah, it's quite all right. And I'm really sorry about the technical issues. I thought my connection was a bit better. So we have made the Cinsault, of course, the Flotsam and Jetsam Cinsault, and at a point I decided to finish that project, mostly because I was afraid that it would just change too much about our identity and the type of winery that we are. But since 2015, I've been messing around with 2014 actually with like a those old mid-century type red wines that we used to make in the Cape, Cabernet Sauvignon blended with a little bit of Cinsault and sort of Cabernet and Friends kind of thing. It was mostly Cinsault, and the labeling laws were pretty slack back then. I'm not sure what the percentages were, but you could make a wine labeled Cabernet and it could have as little as 30 or 40% Cabernet in it. So, the Chateau Libertas wines from the late 50s are a great example of how great those wines were. There was a bit of Cab, a lot of Cinsault, and some Tinta and Syrah and all the odds and ends that they had lying around it. Merlot came in the 80s, and then we changed our direction. And I'm not sure if it was for the better. I don't have a problem with Merlot the grape. I just think that in our climate, that old sort of model of Cabernet and Cinsault and Friends, that seemed to work quite well and made some very original, interesting wines. So we made a 14, 15, 16, and 17, and like 1,000 bottles of each, and just kept them here to drink. And our 2017, we had a few bottles, and we've released them just to our private mailing list here in South Africa. It's a wine called Wine Dark Sea, which is a bit of an odd name. It's after the book from Homer, the story, the Iliad and etc., the Odyssey. He refers multiple times to the wine dark sea, or it also translates to the wine faced sea, and it's still a very mysterious phrase. No one really knows exactly what he meant, and I like that. And plus, it's wine, it's dark, and it was mostly close to the sea. So a bit of tongue-in-cheek sort of nomenclature there, but that's what we called it. And it's lovely wine. I actually don't have a label to show you. And there is a grape that really is calling my name, and it might just be one of those things that I'm excited about that might never make it into our range, because we're pretty much a white wine house. But Pontac, the grape Pontac was big here in the early days of Cape viticulture, and it with phylloxera, it was pretty much wiped here. We do have a few vines still around, and there's a local sort of historian / wine journalist called Joanna Gibson, and she's written some really interesting stuff on early records of Pontac and the type of wine it used to make. And some of our early sort of gastronomy heroes like Leipold and these guys used to write about this great grape, and these wonderful wines that it makes, and that if it were ever discovered, it would be a thing. So all of these, it really awakens the sort of treasure hunter in me, and hoping that maybe there's something special there. I know that Hartenberg bottled the last commercial Pontac in South Africa in 2000, and that they will be replanting with clean material soon, and that I'm pretty certain that Yevon will be planting something. So if I can get hold of good Pontac material and find a good spot to plant, I think that would be a red wine that would very well fit what we're trying to do with making people aware of South African heritage, and particularly our Venice heritage. It would fit very well with that narrative, and could make a very original red wine that I'd be very happy to put our name on. Other than that, we drink a lot of red wine at home, particularly my wife Suzanne. She drinks a lot of Syrah, and I love giving her red wines blind. She's getting really good at picking them these days. We drink a bit of Northern Rhone and a bit of Burgundy, and South African Syrahs I'm crazy about. I love and Grenache, mad about Grenache, and these red blends. I think we're making some very, very interesting red wines these days in the Cape, and the temptation is severe to get into that. But I think we need to protect our identity a little bit, and have a really clear identity, as tempting as it is. And I do make red every year just for fun, just for home consumption. But that's it.
And Chris, just to step in there, I do know that one of the grapes that you said that you and Suzanne both loved when you were traveling in Europe was Riesling, and I believe you've planted some Riesling.
Wonderful grape, isn't it? It's a bit of a bittersweet sort of story, Joe. We have planted Riesling up in an amazing place in the mountains in Ceres. It's 1,260 meters above sea level, and it snows every year, and it really should make great wine. But unfortunately, the participation on the part of the farmer hasn't really been there, So we haven't been able to harvest almost anything off that vineyard. We planted.
That's a great shame.
It's been a series of heartbreaks. The most we got was a barrel of wine 2 years ago, and it just wasn't enough to do anything with. But we hope that vineyard. We're busy trying to take control of the vineyard, and hopefully we can do something with that Riesling. The farmer's a terrific guy, but he's just got a lot going on. he's an accountant, and the farm is sort of a passion project for him. It's not really his main focus. So we feel like we need to step in and help to get things going in the right direction there.
Thank you very much.
And then I did spot one of the questions that came in was also about a sweet wine, and I believe you have something. I don't know whether it's still bubbling away in the cellar or whether you've bottled any.
Yeah, we bottled a wine earlier at the end of last year or earlier this year called Lost and Found. The name of the farm is Gevonden, which Dutch Afrikaans means found, and it's just quite a personal story between us and the young farmer, and he emigrated to Australia right after that vintage. So, and he was the 6th generation, and basically sort of almost the end of the story for us in a way. The vineyard is a remarkable plot. We don't know exactly when it was planted, but it seems like it was in the 1880s. Certainly, when record keep started in 1900, it was definitely already in production. And the family says 1888. So I don't know, but it's according to Rosa, it was the oldest producing vineyard that she knew about in South Africa. So we made a straw wine from that. It's a Muscat vineyard. It's a Honopwit Muscat Alexandria vineyard. The straw wine is called Lost and Found, and it's in these little wooden boxes, little three bottles in a box. We've only got so much, and we're not in a big rush to sell it. We're probably going to sell it over 4 or 5 years, just release a little bit every year. We released it this year, and not many people know about it. The uptake has been quite slow, but the wine has got a few very nice write-ups already. It's a very, very special spot, and that's it. I do really like the idea of also. This might seem like it doesn't really fit. Maybe it does, but I really like the idea of making Constantia wine. If I could find a good plot in Constantia, I'd love to make a Constantia wine. I think it's really also an amazing part of South African history, and I do have sort of plans to go down that road if the right things come together, but I don't own any land in Constantia. Very expensive over there. That's probably enough about that.
And in the closer to home, in the heaven that is Hemel-en-Aarde, you obviously have the Hemelrand vineyard. Would you consider trying to have vineyards closer to the cellar, closer to where you're actually based? Because you cover an awful lot of miles going to tend a lot of these vineyards.
Yeah, we drive a lot. Joe, the Hemelrand vineyard has really woken me up to what's possible in the Hemel-en-Aarde. I was always 100% sure about the old vine chenin thing, and the Swartland was proven, and to be frank, I wasn't 100% sure about the Hemel-en-Aarde. I don't know why, when I think about it, but 2 or 3 years into working with the Hemelrand vineyard, it was pretty obvious that we were sitting on something good, and that and tasting my friends' wines from the Hemel-en-Aarde, Peter Allen's wines. It's just screamingly obvious to anybody who's interested in South African wine that the quality potential is amazing. So yeah, if I do have the opportunity to plant in the Hemel-en-Aarde, I would do that. But right now, with the size of our business and everything that we've undertaken, to quote my dad, I feel a little bit like a little dog who's chasing the car and has finally caught the car and now he doesn't know what to do with it. So I've bitten off quite a bit, and I'm just trying to do everything that we have on our plate right now, trying to do it well before we take any more steps.
Well, I have to say that there was one trip, I think we rode together down to your favorite coffee shop one time, and you were chatting, and we passed a little, I don't know whether it was an old cellar or exactly what the building was, but you said, I've always kind of had a dream that I might open a little craft brewery in that little building over there. Yeah. So presumably that one's on the back burner too.
Very much. Yeah, it came from when we spent time in Western Australia, and we saw that, close to Perth and Swan Valley, there were 5 or 6 of these little breweries with one guy on a guitar, 4 or 5 beers on tap, and just pizza, and they did so well, and it was just such a lack of thing. But we've kind of realized that we're not going to. you know, I'm one of those personality types, which is, it can be really fun to be in my head, but you know, I'm also not good at always finishing what I start, you know, so I need to be careful with that. And I have all these dreams of things that I want to do and ground that I want to break. But the older I'm getting, the more I realize that that's fine to break new ground, but you have to follow through, you have to finish, you know, and you have to try to do it well. So all those fanciful ideas that I had sort of 7 or 8 years ago, I think a lot of them are on the back burner now. I just want to make sure that I don't get boring. I don't want to become boring, you know. But I also don't want to be a fool and just run into everything that tickles my fancy for 6 months and you know, run like a lemming off the cliff every time I see something I like. I'm a bit more circumspect, a bit more careful now, I think. Yeah.
Well, I have to say your grown-up focus is all to our benefit, because that's why we've got this parcel of exhibition chenin. Which I should say to anybody that's watching, we're introducing the wine now. The normal price is going to be $13.95, but it's going out with a special introductory price. And for some reason, in our wisdom, that special introductory price is only available until midnight tomorrow. So if anybody would like to try it at the introductory price, then I would suggest giving it a go. Get your order in. But we do have a reasonable quantity, so we're hoping that we will have the wine going forward for some time. And then, yeah, I'll be looking forward to tasting the 2020 in due course. Chris is ready to show it. But otherwise, Chris, for the moment, we're really happy that you focus on what you do best. And hey, those wines couldn't be further from boring. So you stick with that. That's all fine by us.
Thanks very much, Joe. Appreciate it. And as I said again, you know, it's a real honor for us to be working so closely with you guys. What you do is pretty remarkable, getting good wine out to so many people in such a clever way. Very good. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Chris, for joining us. Thank you, Joe, so much as well for today. I do hope all the members have enjoyed it. I can confirm, having just tried the new exhibition, that as soon as we finish this call, I will be going on to order some more. So I'm going to be taking advantage of the introductory price.
Thanks.
So you don't need to take my word for it, but do grab a bottle at that price if you do want to before the end of tomorrow. I'll send a follow-up email, like we said as well. Any questions that didn't get answered, we'll try and get a couple of those through to Chris and get some answers, but perhaps not immediately, but in the next few days or weeks. Chris is rather busy. But thank you all very much for joining. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day wherever you are. And if you are enjoying a glass of wine, then cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for listening,
Chris.
everybody. Thanks, Joe. Yeah. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Bye.